Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's do it. Those of you that believe in the paranormal, what is your experience? Please remember to like, share, comment, hype, listen, and ask for shoutouts, and subscribe. I'm an outdoorsman. I'm very experienced in hunting, camping, hiking, and general survival. I'm very familiar and used to wildlife, and I was charged by what I believe was a cryptid called a dogman. It charged me and my cousin. It was not a bear. A bear cannot move how it did, and it was not a normal wolf, as they can't comfortably run on two legs, whereas what charged us seemed natural at doing so. I can elaborate further, if you wish. This happened around June or July of 2007, I believe. I was around 17 years old and more cocky then, but still somewhat knowledgeable of the outdoors. My family used to own a cabin in northwest Wisconsin. I basically grew up there in the summer. I knew the woods well, but at night it was wise to stay in the cabin, or at least by the bonfire by the beach, because of bears, wolves, and cougars. One of the creepiest things was, if you were having a bonfire, the tree line was visible from the fire pit and beach, and at night, you always felt like you were being watched from the tree line. But during the day, the woods always seemed normal. Not so creepy, that is, until this incident. So, this happened somewhere between 12 and 2. I and my cousin were having an airsoft battle. I was in full woodland camo, he was not. I retreated onto the ATV trail into the woods for a tactical advantage, and our battle took us about 200 meters in. About a third of the way up the trail, we had had enough at this point, and were standing at the edge of a clearing on the trail talking, and he was maybe 10 feet from where I decided to mess with him. I shushed him and said, "We're being watched." He froze. Then I realized the woods were dead quiet, and I got spooked and started scanning the tree line and the other edge of the clearing from left to right. When I saw it, its teeth gave it away. It was panting and staring at my cousin. I don't expect you to believe me, but what I saw was a wolf as big as a black bear, at least 300 pounds, but it wasn't normal. This wolf was on two legs, crouching next to a tree, with its arm grasping the tree, grasping with a clawed hand, and it had reddish brown fur. I told my cousin that we have to go, and the next thing I know, he's sprinting, and I look back at Wolfie, who had locked on and sprinted a few steps on 2 feet, and then I turned and ran when it looked like Wolfie was dropping to all fours. It charged us, and sounded right on our asses, barreling through the brush, but for whatever reason, it let us go when we broke out of the tree line and headed for the cabin. What stuck with me the most was the sheer size. Wolfie appeared to be nearly 7 feet tall when upright, and where it should have had front paws, it appeared to have large clawed hands. Now I'm not sure how to explain it away rationally. I have heard wolves will occasionally kind of walk upright, but as far as I know, they can't sprint on two legs, nor do wolves get that big, and black bears more waddle on two legs. The closest description is silly, a werewolf or dogman. Thank you for reading. I go camping and multi-day hiking as a hobby. I've been stalked by a mountain lion before, and have been hopelessly lost 100 miles from anything, so I know the woods. The weirdest thing I've ever heard was a wailing in the night. I don't know what the thing was, but I woke up around 2 a.m., my fire had died, and there was an overcast, so it was pretty much completely dark. I was camped in a ravine-like valley, cutting through the mountains of Tennessee. The noise was in the valley, coming right at me from a distance over 500 yards. It really sounded like a man yelling in deathly agony. If you've ever heard someone's yells who was passing due to trauma, this is how it sounded. It's an odd and unsettling thing to describe. Anyways, I was lying in the dark, gun in hand, while this thing was getting closer and closer, within 300 yards. It stopped wailing and left me in silence. A couple minutes after it stopped, I could hardly make out a figure in the dark about 25 yards to my right. Whatever it was tall, at least 5 feet or so, and it was moving roughly west to east at a pretty good pace, making absolutely no noise as it went. It seemed to be gliding along. There was no lateral movement with this thing. It just went by, and I heard it wail a couple more times far down the valley. The next day, I checked for tracks and didn't find any of significance, just old deer tracks. I still have no idea what could have made that noise. It was hauntingly human and sounded extremely distressed. I still don't believe in the paranormal, but that definitely made me question it. What convinced me was I saw it happen, and my cousin saw it with me. Was cruising through some rural area in my cousin's car, I want to say at 1 or 2 a.m. We weren't smoking or drinking, just having a nice cruise. We went on this road that went through some heavy woods, but we did it before, so we have no fear. It was dark, of course, with no moon, with just a slight sprinkle of rain. We were coming to this part in the woods where there was a street light, but it was an old light and it was dimming out. There used to be an old building there, but it was torn down, but the light stayed up for a few years. Mind you, this was very rural. No one lived nearby for maybe 20 miles, so it was extremely rare you'd pass another car, let alone another person at this time. It didn't help that the locals said to stay out of the woods at night. I was just looking out my window at the woods when we were coming up to the light. Next thing I know, the car does a movie turn, like stomp the brakes, do a 180, and effing burn rubber the other way. I got weirded out and look back through the car. I see the road illuminated by the street light and see this massive black figure beside the road. It takes one step and it's in the middle of the road, another step and it's already on the other side. Immediately I look forward, scared out of my mind, look at my cousin and see intense fear on his face. We don't say a word to each other and he drops me off. I stay up till sunrise and finally go to sleep. Funny now that I think about it, we never talked about it once. Not after it happened, but yeah, we saw Bigfoot, as do the locals who tell similar stories. Driving home from my parents' house last winter around 9 p.m., no other cars on the road. I was flipping through the radio stations, probably not paying as much attention to the road as I should have been, trying to find something interesting to listen to. I looked up from the radio and saw what I thought might be a blue plastic bag or something on the road just ahead. My eyes fixated on it as I tried to stop. It looked completely still and surreal, like really dense and really calm smoke, completely motionless. ABS kicked in, but I couldn't stop in time. I didn't hear a thud, but I got out to look anyway. This is in rural Maine near a college. It's really not uncommon to see wildlife in the road, especially with trash from the college. I've seen raccoons with bags stuck on their heads, dogs carrying around trash bags, and all sorts of critters. I wanted to make sure I didn't hit one, so I got out to check. I looked all over outside. No tracks on the road besides my own tire tracks. No footprints. I had to rationalize what I saw. Maybe it was steam from a storm drain. Not many storm drains in the middle of nowhere in Maine. I looked all over the road for an explanation. Finally, I shined my light over toward the woods, and I was stopped, I shit you not, directly next to a cross on the side of the road where a pedestrian had been hit and killed a few years ago. Immediately, the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I felt my entire body tingling. I got out of there pretty quick. Alright, kicking off the week with a good paranormal collection here. So glad you guys are here. And we've got another week ahead of cool and interesting topics. So looking forward to bringing them to you. And we will see you tomorrow. Our family vacations when I was a kid were always camping and hiking. Lots of hiking. Usually somewhere in Virginia, West Virginia, or Tennessee. We went to the Blue Ridge Mountains pretty often. We always did day hikes, so we'd get to the peak and back down in one day without worrying about nightfall. We were at the top of one of the mountains, and I was messing around, climbing up on this rock that was even higher up. I walked around the taller rock, and this guy, walking stick in hand, red shorts and white t-shirt, was standing there. It surprised me a bit because I didn't know someone else was on this part of the mountain. And he smiles at me and goes, "Careful, it drops off over here." And he walked around the bend a little out of sight, and I followed. Saw the huge drop-off, but no fellow hiker anywhere. He wasn't there. I turned around and walked back and met up with my parents again and told them about this. My dad said it must have been a guardian angel. I don't know what it was. Paranormal? Maybe. Not spooky, just a friendly warning. There was no one in that whole mountaintop area that looked anything like him. He didn't walk past me to go back down. It was very, very real. I can honestly not explain it. When I was about 8, and my mom and I lived with some family friends, during winter I was staring out the window looking at the snow, and out of the corner of my eye I saw a grandmother. I've only seen her in photos, mainly because she committed suicide before I was 1. From the corner of my eye I could see white slippers, what looked like one of those nightgowns some old people wear, and the bottom of her dark brown curls. Obviously this startled me, and I ran to go tell my mom about this because they were really close. I stopped for some reason and looked at the floor and slowly looked up and realized that she was in front of me. Once I realized what just happened, I went and told my mom. She said that my grandmother was looking after me since we were going through a hard time, and that I always should consider her my guardian angel after that. I still don't understand what I saw. When I was in 4th grade, I just moved into my dad and stepmom's house. My sister and I slept in bunk beds, hers being the bottom and mine on top. The bed rested against the wall with the door at the foot of the bed. One night, I'm sleeping at the head of the bed, and I wake up and hear some weird noises. At first I think it's my sister, but I poke my head down and see that it's not. Something compels me to look out the door and into the hallway. I scoot down to the foot of the bed and stick my head out the top of the foot frame and face my parents' bedroom door that is across from mine. I look to the floor, and there's this pitch-black human-looking thing on the ground. I don't know what I did, but it noticed me, and it scuttled or crawled fast across the floor and up my bunk ladder, and I just remember seeing black. I remember waking up that morning at the same spot of the bed. If anybody has any idea of what this is, it would help a lot. Years ago, I was at a Boy Scout camp with my troop. I was standing by our fire pit with one of my friends as the sun set. Our campsite was mostly empty due to other scouts participating in a water polo tournament or some other beach activity set up by the counselors. There were no cats in the campsite, or surrounding the camp, at least according to the counselors, when this occurred. By our fire pit there was a prickly bush that had very little green vegetation to conceal the growth beneath it. My friend is the type to mess with me, but I've told this story so many times while in his presence that he could have gotten sick of it and would have told me if he was just messing with me in order for me to stop talking about it. I was standing with my friend by the fire pit when I looked to the side of the fire pit and saw a short-haired black cat with amber eyes smelling the ground. I comment to my friend about the cat, as I'm one of those people that just randomly says words about the things around them, and he asks, "What cat?" I gesture my head toward the cat and say, "That cat." He says, "I don't see a cat." I point at it and say, "That cat." He just gives me a look, so I walk closer to the cat to where I'm about 5 feet away from it, and I say, "That cat," again. He just gives me a look, so I walk right up to the cat, as in right up, and point straight down at the cat, saying determinedly, "That cat." I look at him, and he continues just blinking at me. I look down at the cat, and it looks up at me, seeming to only just realize that I could see it. It turns around and starts walking toward one of the thorn bushes at the edge of the fire pit, but before it gets there, it just vanishes. I don't mean like poof in a puff of smoke, or it walked behind a bit of tree stump and didn't cross back into my line of sight. I mean that as it was walking, my brain was processing that it was walking, and when it disappeared, my brain expected it to keep walking, but it couldn't handle the counter logic of what was actually going on. It was like there were missing frames, like if you were watching a film on a film reel and someone decided to cut out 5 seconds of a scene mid-sentence and moved on to another character talking instead. You noticed that it wasn't something terribly too specific that was missing, but it was still important enough to you that you noticed it wasn't there. The cat wasn't ghostly at all. It looked like I could have reached down and pet it at any moment. Something I was actually considering doing until it up and disappeared. I've had several experiences with the paranormal over the years, but this was the experience that really caused me to reevaluate everything I knew and had experienced about the world. My friend still says he never saw a cat. When I was younger, I used to collect porcelain dolls. My mom was a huge fan and would often bring me some back from Mexico. The dolls would move out of the corner of my eye, sometimes appearing in new places I hadn't placed them. Eventually, I got rid of my entire collection out of fear. But this isn't about the dolls. Around 10 years old, my aunt used to drop her kid off at random hours of the night so she could party freely. I remember many nights waking up and seeing my younger cousin crying, standing next to my bed, waiting for me to acknowledge her. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m. and saw the outline of a small girl with long curly hair. I spoke out to her thinking it was my cousin, and I told her to come to bed, but she was unmoving. The outline stayed there staring at me. Eventually, I went back to sleep, still under the assumption it was my kid cousin acting up. The following morning, I went into the kitchen searching for my cousin. I remember asking my mom where she was at, and she told me my cousin never came by that night. Fast forward a couple of years, more spooky shit continues going on in the house, so my mother brings in a lady to bless the house. When the woman walked into my room, I remember the look on her face. She stopped and looked around, whispering prayers. The woman stopped her whispers and asked my mom, "Have you had a daughter that's passed?" Of course, I'm the only living daughter, so I tell the woman, "No, it can't be possible." But my mom spoke about how before I was born, she had miscarried another girl. The woman continued on describing the unborn sister. She had curly hair like me. She enjoyed playing with dolls, and according to the woman, she came often to visit me. I don't know if it's real. In fact, I don't think ghosts are real, but I also don't know what I saw. About 10 years ago, I was working as a private investigator. It sounds cool, but it's actually not. You spend about 3 to 5 hours each day driving to your cases, stake them out in blazing hot car with the engine off for 8 hours, and then spend 1 to 3 hours in a hotel room writing up your reports before finally getting some sleep and doing it all over again. I did this job for about a year after completing my training to be a medic in the Army Reserves. I was young at the time, so the idea of making $50K a year and traveling all over the country while living out of a suitcase seemed appealing to 19-year-old me. As I said above, you spend a lot of time driving in areas you're not necessarily familiar with. On one of these late nights, I found myself driving on a twisting mountain road just outside Taos, New Mexico. The area was heavily wooded with narrow roads that curved sharply without a lot of places to turn off, since you were driving up and around mountains. In the middle of the night, as I maneuvered my rental vehicle through a curve, I saw a woman stumbling along the side of the road carrying a small child. The sight caught me off guard and sent a shiver down my spine. It was so unexpected and so out of place. There were no houses or businesses around me, and it was around 2 a.m. and pitch black. This unnerved me, but what sent the shivers down my spine was the way she moved. She lurched along with what I can only describe as a shuffle, straight out of a George Romero zombie flick. And she didn't look up or acknowledge me as I drove by. She just stared aimlessly at the road in front of her. You have to remember, I was a 19-year-old that was fresh out of a year of extensive army training. I was in peak physical shape, and I thought I was Billy Badass at the time. I had spent a month working in a trauma center as part of my training, so I didn't and still don't get freaked out by these things, but this scared me. I drove on for a minute or two thinking about what I saw. Who was she? What was she doing out here at that time of night? How did she get there? The more rational part of my brain took over from my lizard brain, and I came to a horrifying realization. I had been driving for about 1.5 miles past her, and I hadn't seen any homes or businesses, nor had I come across any places to turn off since I had seen her, and it had been about 10 miles since I had come across a place to turn before I saw her. This wasn't normal. Something was wrong. I realized that she had to be hurt or in trouble. Perhaps she had been in a car accident and was in shock. What if the child she was carrying was hurt? I was a medic. I had trained for a year to help people. Sure, I was scared and unnerved, but how would I feel if I found out later they died of exposure on that mountain, and I was too much of a coward to go back and help? Wouldn't I also be scared the first time I saw combat, when my friends were depending on me? I had to man up and turn around, and as soon as it was safe, I did. I drove back to where I had seen her, half relieved and half horrified when I didn't find her. I traced the road 6 times. Where could she have gone? There was only a small area on the side of the road and guardrails for miles. I drove and turned around and drove and turned around and drove and turned around. I was obsessed with finding her, or finding what had happened. Part of it was out of concern for her and her child. Part of it was about proving to myself that I would do the right thing with my training, even when I was scared shitless. After a while, however, it became about me proving to myself that I wasn't fucking insane. I spent hours looking for her. Eventually, I stopped my car and started walking along the road looking for any signs of her or any disturbances on the mountain to indicate a vehicle had crashed off the road and down the mountain. I walked that entire 3-mile stretch of road in pitch black with a flashlight, at times yelling like a madman, listening to every twig and echo with bated breath. I didn't even care about my deadline or my next case. I was so sure of what I saw that I was all in. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't seeing things. I wasn't overly tired. I saw her stumbling down that road. There's no doubt in my mind. The image is etched in my memory. But there was nothing. Even when the sun came up and I drove that stretch of road another 6 times, there was nothing. And there were no ways for me to explain it away, even after countless sleepless nights in the 10 years since devoted to it. I don't believe in ghosts. I see the BS documentaries and laugh away their evidence as stupid orbs like the rest of you do. But I also don't know where the hell that stumbling woman and her child came from or where they went. So, on the off chance you were stumbling down a windy road in Taos, New Mexico, about 10 years ago, with a toddler in your arms, please tell me what the hell happened, where you came from, where you went, and that you're both okay. I've been puzzled by it for a decade now. I lived in a house with a poltergeist for around 15 years. The house was Victorian and the poltergeist just used to steal things and then put them back in odd places weeks later. We often found my dad's and my glasses in funny places in the morning after we'd put them on the bedside table at night, like in the cat's food bowl or once in the garden. My A-level Latin set textbook of the Aeneid went missing for 2 weeks before turning up in the fridge, a month before my exam as well. That one was irritating. A coffee table was once moved from the downstairs living room to the living room upstairs overnight. We found a plant from the garden dumped on our dining room table once, roots and soil and all. We set up cameras for a few months at one point, after I found my glasses in the garden, because we thought maybe one of us was sleepwalking, or the cat was stealing things, but No sleepwalking, no kleptomaniac cat, and no floating objects or anything either. It was like stuff would dematerialize and rematerialize somewhere else. I did not believe in such, and I still hold the view that 99.999% of such observations are either of the following: intellectual misinterpretations, that is, you settle for paranormal reasoning instead of rational one, overvalued ideas, hallucinations, sleep paralysis, some medical cause like CO poisoning, drugs, high fever, culturally patterned deductions, or even outright delusions. However, my own experiences, shared by multiple people at different times but within the same place over an extended period of time, convinced all of us, the observers, victims, and subjects, that the paranormal per se exists. Just how do you explain a levitating bed, high enough for me to leave scratch marks up on the ceiling? Both me and my wife had to wake up to an irritating knock on our bedroom door in the dead of the night to see my father staring at me and carrying a very angry look, saying absolutely nothing as we asked him if everything was all right, escorting him back to his bedroom, opening his bedroom door to discover that my father was sound asleep on the bed, and the entity who we had escorted being nowhere. It all happened from the late 90s to early 2000s. We sold that house. I can narrate loads of such like happenings, but that is what and why I'm a believer. I was at a party, pretty stoned and drunk, and asked my friend to take me home. She had a friend of hers drive me home, and I told her friend, who I had never met before, to pull over because her grandmother wanted to talk to her. She pulled over, and I gave her messages from her grandmother, who had been dead for about 2 months. I had initials of men that her grandmother wanted her to stop messing with. I had never met this girl, and I'll probably never see her again, and it felt like I had no control over my mouth. I was still in my body and was conscious of what was happening, but I felt like thoughts were being dropped into my head, and the words were coming out of my mouth with no effort on my part whatsoever. I thought I was crazy. She was sobbing in the front seat. It was bizarre, and I thought nothing else of it. Until a week later, I was on Twitter and had to get offline because everyone's dead uncle wanted to talk to them. I went to dinner with my friend and told her about her dad, who used to sit in the corner of his favorite bar drinking tequila. Then some guy walked by me on the sidewalk while we were eating lunch on the patio, and I told him I had to talk to him because his Aunt Rose wanted him to change the light bulb in his mom's closet. He started crying and thanked me. I looked up the symptoms for schizophrenia and was convinced I was schizophrenic. But there's no way I could know someone's dead aunt's name and how she died and about the light bulbs in the closet, especially some guy who I'd literally pulled off the sidewalk. I haven't had an incident like that in years. I miss it because I was able to bring closure to a lot of people, but it was scary and overwhelming to deal with. Definitely made me question my sanity a lot.